Dr. Jasmine Brooks finished her shift at Emory University Hospital at 6:47 p.m. on a Thursday evening. She'd just completed a 6-hour cardiac surgery, saved a patient's life through a complex aortic valve replacement, and was exhausted. But she had one more thing to do before heading home: buy a car. At 29 years old, Jasmine was one of the youngest cardiothoracic surgeons at one of the nation's top hospitals. She'd graduated from medical school at the top of her class, completed a grueling surgical residency, and had recently been offered a permanent position at Emory with a salary that reflected her exceptional skills. Her old Honda Civic, which had served her faithfully through medical school and residency, was finally giving up after 7,000 miles. She'd been researching luxury vehicles for weeks and had decided on a Mercedes-Benz S-Class. She'd done her homework, compared models, checked safety ratings, secured financing pre-approval from her bank, and identified the specific vehicle she wanted at Premium Motors, a luxury dealership in Buckhead. What Jasmine didn't mention in her online inquiry, and what the dealership staff didn't know, was that her father, Robert Brooks, owned Premium Motors and 3 other luxury dealerships in the Atlanta area through Brooks Automotive Group. Robert had built his business from a single used car lot to a multi-million-dollar dealership empire over 30 years. Recently, Robert had been receiving complaints about discriminatory practices at his Premium Motors location, particularly from black customers who reported being ignored, dismissed, or treated with suspicion by sales staff. Rather than simply confronting his managers based on complaints, Robert had designed a test. He'd asked Jasmine to visit Premium Motors as a regular customer without revealing her connection to the owner. She would present herself as she was, a young black woman in medical scrubs, fresh from work, looking to purchase a luxury vehicle. Robert wanted to see how his sales team would treat her compared to how they'd treat a white customer with similar credentials. Jasmine had agreed, partly to help her father evaluate his business practices, partly because she genuinely needed a car, and partly because she was curious whether she'd experienced the discrimination her father's other customers had reported. She pulled into Premium Motors' parking lot at 7:14 p.m. The dealership was still open until 8 p.m., and the showroom glowed with bright lights showcasing gleaming luxury vehicles: Mercedes, BMW, Audi, Lexus. Jasmine walked through the glass doors into the showroom, still wearing her scrubs with her Emory Hospital ID badge visible. She carried her designer bag, a gift from her mother, and walked with the confidence of someone who'd just saved a human life. 3 salespeople were visible in the showroom. 2 were engaged with customers, but one, a man in an expensive suit with Craig Henderson, sales manager, on his badge, was standing near the manager's desk, scrolling through his phone. He looked up as Jasmine entered. His eyes scanned her from head to toe. Medical scrubs, tired expression, young black woman. His face registered immediate dismissal. Jasmine approached him. "Good evening. I'm interested in looking at the S-Class sedans." Craig barely looked up from his phone. "The S-Class starts at about $115,000. Pretty expensive vehicle. I'm aware of the price range. I've been researching them for several weeks. I'd like to see the models you have available." Craig finally put his phone away, but his body language remained closed off. "Look, I'm going to save us both some time here. The S-Class is a premium luxury vehicle. The financing requirements are pretty strict. Do you have an idea of what your budget actually is?" "My budget is up to $130,000. I have pre-approval from my bank." Jasmine pulled out her phone to show him the pre-approval letter. Craig glanced at it dismissively. "Bank pre-approvals aren't always reliable. And honestly, I'm not sure you understand what you're getting into with a vehicle like this. The maintenance costs alone are significant. Insurance is expensive. This isn't like buying a Honda." The condescension in his tone was unmistakable. Jasmine kept her voice level. "I understand the costs associated with luxury vehicle ownership. I've done extensive research. Now, can I see the vehicles?" Craig sighed as if she were wasting his time. "What do you do for work?" "I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon at Emory." "A surgeon?" Craig's tone suggested disbelief. "You look pretty young to be a surgeon." "I'm 29. I completed medical school and residency. I'm board certified. I'm fully qualified to purchase this vehicle." Craig crossed his arms. "Look, medical professionals can have all kinds of debt. Student loans, credit card debt. Just because you're a doctor doesn't mean you can afford a $130,000 car. I've seen plenty of people with good jobs who are terrible with money. which is why I have pre-approval documentation showing my creditworthiness, Jasmine said, her patience wearing thin. Now, are you going to show me the vehicles, or do I need to speak with someone else? I'm the sales manager. Everyone here reports to me. Craig's tone made clear he considered himself the gatekeeper. And I'm telling you that you're probably not a realistic buyer for these vehicles. Maybe you should look at our certified pre-owned section. We have some nice 3 Series BMWs, E-Class Mercedes, vehicles in the $40,000 range that might be more appropriate. I don't want a used car. I want a new S-Class. I have the budget, the credit approval, and a specific model in mind. I'm a qualified buyer. Craig shook his head. You know what I think? I think you came in here to look at expensive cars you can't afford. Maybe take some pictures for Instagram. Tell your friends you're shopping for a Mercedes. We get people like that all the time, and it wastes our time. People like what? Jasmine asked, her voice dangerously calm. People who aren't serious buyers. Look, there's a CarMax about 2 miles from here. They have all kinds of vehicles in different price ranges. That might be a better fit for you. Jasmine pulled out her tablet and opened a notes app. I want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly. You're refusing to show me vehicles because you've determined, based on no actual evidence, that I can't afford them. I'm using my professional judgment based on 20 years in this business. I can tell who's a serious buyer and who's not. And you determined I'm not a serious buyer based on what? My age, my scrubs, or something else? Craig's face reddened slightly. I'm not going to stand here and be accused of anything. I've explained that I don't think you're a realistic buyer for these premium vehicles. If you want to file a complaint, there's a website, but I'm done with this conversation. He turned to walk away. Jasmine called after him. Before you walk away, I have one question. Would you have treated me the same way if I were white? Craig spun around. That's inappropriate. Race has nothing to do with this. Then what does it have to do with? Because I've presented you with pre-approval, stated my occupation and income level, explained I've done research, and identified a specific vehicle I want to purchase. Yet you've decided I'm not a serious buyer and suggested I shop elsewhere. So if it's not race, what is it? Craig's jaw tightened. I'm asking you to leave now. If you don't leave voluntarily, I'll call security. Call security because a qualified buyer asked to see vehicles. Jasmine pulled out her phone. I'm recording this conversation now, by the way. Georgia is a one-party consent state, so that's legal. You just threatened to have me removed from this dealership, despite my being a legitimate customer with pre-approval and stated intent to purchase. Stop recording me, Craig demanded. It's legal, and I want documentation of how Premium Motors treats black customers. Jasmine looked directly at Craig. How many other people have you turned away, Mr. Henderson? How many other black professionals have walked in here with money to spend and been told to go to CarMax? I've never discriminated against anyone. You discriminated against me in the past 15 minutes. You questioned my finances despite pre-approval. You suggested used cars when I stated I wanted new. You accused me of wanting Instagram photos rather than making a purchase. You told me to leave, all without showing me a single vehicle or making any genuine effort to help me. One of the other salespeople, a younger black man, had been watching the interaction. He approached cautiously. Miss, I'm Marcus Williams. I'd be happy to help you look at vehicles if stay out of this, Marcus, Craig snapped. I'm handling this situation. You're not handling it, Marcus said quietly. You're escalating it. This woman is a qualified buyer who I said I'm handling it. Craig's face was red now. Get back to your desk. Marcus hesitated, then returned to his desk, but Jasmine saw him pull out his phone, likely texting someone. Jasmine looked at Craig one more time. I'm going to leave now as you've requested, but I want you to know that this interaction will be reported, and I want you to think about how many sales you've lost, how many customers you've driven away, because you made assumptions about people based on their appearance. She walked toward the exit, then turned back. Oh, and Mr. Henderson, you might want to update your resume. You're going to need it. Craig laughed dismissively. Is that a threat? You think you can get me fired because I wouldn't show you cars you can't afford? Not a threat. An observation. Jasmine walked out of Premium Motors, got in her Honda Civic, and immediately called her father. Dad, it's worse than you thought. Robert Brooks listened to his daughter's account of the interaction, his anger building with each detail. Then Jasmine played him the audio recording she'd made of the conversation with Craig Henderson. When it ended, Robert was silent for a long moment. I'm sorry you experienced that, sweetheart. I'm okay, Dad. I'm more angry than hurt. But this is exactly what your other customers have been reporting, isn't it? Yes, but hearing it happen to my daughter makes it very real. Robert's voice was tight. Craig Henderson has been with Premium Motors for 20 years. He's one of my top salespeople in terms of numbers, but apparently those numbers come at the cost of turning away qualified qualified black customers. What are you going to do? First, I'm going to review every customer complaint we've received about Craig. Second, I'm going to pull sales data to see if there are patterns in who he sells to versus who he turns away. Third, I'm calling an emergency meeting tomorrow morning with Craig and the entire Premium Motors team. And fourth, I'm going to make sure this never happens again at any of my dealerships. Do you want me there for the meeting? Robert considered this. Yes, I want Craig to see exactly who he refused service to. I want him to understand the consequences of his discrimination. Can you come in at 9 a.m.? I'll be there. That night, Robert's team worked late pulling data on Craig Henderson's sales history. What they found was damning. Over the past 5 years at Premium Motors, Craig had sold 487 vehicles. 451 sales were to white customers, 92.6%. 23 sales were to Asian American customers, 4.7%. 9 sales were to Latino customers, 1.8%. 4 sales were to black customers. Even more telling was the data on customer interactions that didn't result in sales. 355 were marked not qualified or not serious, and resulted in brief interactions with no vehicle presentations. When they cross-referenced the not qualified interactions with available demographic data from CRM notes and follow-up surveys, not %1% involved customers with traditionally black names or identified as black in follow-up surveys. Not qualified 186%, and some developed survival todos back and twite, quoting Todd Stone. The pattern was undeniable. Craig Henderson had been systematically screening out black and Latino customers based on assumptions rather than actual qualifications. Robert also discovered something else. Craig's top sales numbers were inflated because he was cherry-picking the easiest sales. By refusing to work with customers he perceived as difficult or time-consuming, a perception correlated with race, he maintained high individual numbers while the dealership lost significant revenue from customers who went elsewhere. One analysis was particularly striking. Based on the income and credit profiles of customers Craig had dismissed, gathered from their inquiries and pre-approvals, Premium Motors had lost an estimated $4.7 million in sales over 5 years because Craig had refused to serve them. At 9:03 a.m. the next morning, Craig Henderson walked into the conference room at Premium Motors' corporate office, confused about why he'd been summoned for an emergency meeting. He found Robert Brooks sitting at the head of the table, flanked by the company's general counsel, Sarah Chen, and human resources director, Michelle Taylor. "Robert, what's this about? I'm supposed to be on the showroom floor. Sit down, Craig." Robert's voice was cold. Craig sat, his confusion turning to concern. "Craig, how long have you been with Premium Motors?" 20 years. I'm one of your longest-serving managers. And in those 20 years, how many customers would you estimate you've interacted with? Craig shrugged. "Thousands. I don't know exactly. Our CRM system says 1,247 logged interactions over the past 5 years alone. Of those, how many do you think resulted in sales? I have a good closing rate. I'm one of your top salespeople. You've sold 487 vehicles in 5 years. That's about 97 cars per year, which is indeed above average." Robert paused. "But let's talk about the 760 interactions that didn't result in sales. Can you explain why more than 60% of your customer interactions don't convert?" Craig shifted uncomfortably. "Some people aren't serious buyers. They're window shopping, researching, not ready to buy. You can't close everyone." "True, but Marcus Williams, one of your junior salespeople, has a conversion rate almost twice as high as yours. Why do you think that is?" "Marcus is good with certain types of customers." "What types?" Craig realized he'd walked into a trap. "I just mean he has a different approach. Younger guy relates to different demographics." "By different demographics, do you mean black customers? Because Marcus is black, and looking at his sales data, he sells to a much more diverse customer base than you do." Robert pulled up a presentation on the conference room screen. "Craig, 93% of your sales over 5 years went to white customers, in a city that's 51% black, in a metro area with one of the largest and wealthiest black populations in America. Don't you find that statistic odd?" Craig's face paled. "I sell to whoever comes in and qualifies." "No, you sell to whoever you decide qualifies, and apparently you decide black customers don't qualify." Robert clicked to the next slide showing the not qualified log entries. 71% of customers you marked as not serious or not qualified were black. Yet when we contacted those customers for follow-up surveys, we found that 62% of them had purchased luxury vehicles elsewhere within 3 months. They were serious buyers. They had money to spend. You just decided they didn't based on what? That's not fair. I make business judgments Based on race, Robert interrupted. Let me show you something else. He played the audio recording of Jasmine's interaction with Craig, as Craig's voice filled the conference room, dismissing Jasmine, questioning her finances, suggesting she go to CarMax. His face went from pale to grey. When the recording ended, Robert said, "That woman you refused service to, the one you told to go buy a used car, the one you accused of wanting Instagram photos, that's my daughter, Dr. Jasmine Brooks, cardiothoracic surgeon, 6-figure income, perfect credit, pre-approved for $130,000, and you turned her away in less than 15 minutes. Craig looked like he might be sick. I didn't know. You didn't know she was my daughter, or you didn't know she was a successful surgeon, because she told you she was a surgeon. She showed you pre-approval. She stated her budget, but you decided she wasn't a serious buyer. Why?" Craig had no answer. The door opened, and Jasmine walked in, now wearing professional clothes rather than scrubs. She sat down across from Craig, meeting his eyes. "Miss Brooks, I'm so sorry. If I'd known who you were, if you'd known I was Robert Brooks' daughter," Jasmine corrected. "But what about all the other black professionals you've turned away who weren't related to the owner? Did they deserve better treatment?" Craig stammered. "I never meant to discriminate. I was just trying to be efficient, focus on serious buyers." "You were profiling customers based on race," Sarah Chen, the general counsel, interjected. "And in doing so, you violated federal civil rights laws, state anti-discrimination statutes, and company policy." She slid a document across the table. "These are excerpts from the Civil Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act, as it applies to automotive financing, and Georgia's public accommodations laws. You violated all of them." Michelle Taylor, the HR director, added her own documentation. "This is your employment contract, which includes an anti-discrimination clause. This is the company handbook, which explicitly prohibits discriminatory treatment of customers. And these are 17 complaints filed against you over the past 5 years by customers reporting discriminatory service. Complaints that were noted but never seriously investigated." She looked at Robert. "That's a failure on our part. We should have investigated these complaints properly. We should have seen the pattern." "You're right," Robert agreed, "which is why we're implementing comprehensive changes. But first, we're addressing the immediate problem." He looked at Craig. "Craig Henderson, your employment at Premium Motors is terminated effective immediately. You will be paid through today plus accumulated vacation time. Your access to dealership systems has been revoked. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings." Craig's eyes widened. You can't fire me over one incident. I have 20 years here. I'm one of your top salespeople. You're a salesperson who's cost this company nearly $5 million in lost sales by refusing to serve qualified black customers," Robert corrected. "You're not a top salesperson. You're a discriminatory employee who cherry-picked easy sales while driving away customers who came here ready to buy. I'll sue for wrongful termination." "You can try," Sarah Chen said, "but we have documented evidence of discriminatory practices, audio recordings of you refusing service to qualified customers, and statistical analysis proving pattern of bias. You won't win." Craig looked desperately at Jasmine. "I really am sorry. I made a mistake." "You made dozens of mistakes over many years," Jasmine said. "I'm just the one who happened to be connected to someone with the power to hold you accountable. But I want you to understand something. The problem wasn't that you treated the owner's daughter badly. The problem is that you've been treating black customers badly for years, and you only got away with it because they didn't have power." She leaned forward. "How many sales did you lose? How many relationships did you damage? How many people did you make feel unwelcome and discriminated against? I'm a successful surgeon, financially secure with a supportive family. Your dismissal was insulting, but didn't really harm me. But what about the people who weren't as privileged? What about the young black professional buying their first luxury car, who you turned away, making them feel they didn't belong?" Craig had tears in his eyes now. "I never thought of it that way. I was just doing my job. Your job is to sell cars to qualified buyers, regardless of their race," Robert said. "You failed at that job, and now you're facing the consequences." Security entered the conference room. Craig stood, gathering what little dignity he had left, and walked out without another word. After Craig left, Robert turned to his remaining team. "Michelle, I want a comprehensive review of every manager and salesperson across all 4 dealerships. I want to see sales demographics, customer complaint patterns, interaction logs. If anyone else is engaging in discriminatory practices, I want them identified immediately." He looked at Sarah. "I want new training protocols, mandatory anti-discrimination training for every employee, clear policies on customer interaction, and I want a mechanism for customers to report discrimination directly to corporate, bypassing local management." Michelle nodded. "We'll implement everything. But Robert, I have to ask, why didn't we catch this sooner? 17 complaints should have triggered an investigation. Because I trusted my managers too much. Because I assumed complaints were isolated incidents rather than patterns. Because I was focused on sales numbers without asking whose sales were being lost." Robert looked at Jasmine.
It took my daughter being discriminated against for me to really see the problem. That's a failure of oversight on my part. Over the next month, Brooks Automotive Group conducted a comprehensive audit of all 4 dealerships. The findings were sobering. Craig Henderson wasn't the only problem, though he was the worst. 2 other sales managers at different dealerships showed similar patterns of lower sales to black customers. Several salespeople admitted they'd felt pressured to focus on high-probability customers, a term that had become code for white customers. Customer surveys revealed that 31% of black customers felt they'd been treated with less respect than white customers at Brooks dealerships. Robert made wholesale changes. 1.0 tolerance discrimination policy. Any employee found to be discriminating based on race, gender, or any protected class would be immediately terminated. 2. Blind initial interactions. When customers made online inquiries, their photos and names were hidden from sales staff during initial qualification processes. Salespeople would see budget, credit score, and vehicle interest, but not demographic information. 3. Mystery shopper program. Regular undercover evaluations by diverse shoppers testing whether all customers received equal service. 4. Compensation reform. Salespeople would no longer be penalized for spending time with customers who didn't immediately buy. Metrics would include customer satisfaction scores from all demographics, not just closing rates. 5. Diversity in sales staff. Active recruitment of salespeople from diverse backgrounds to better reflect the community served. 6. Customer advocate position. A dedicated employee at each dealership whose job was to handle discrimination complaints and ensure resolution. 7. Transparency reports. Quarterly public reports on customer demographics, satisfaction scores by race, and discrimination complaint resolution. The reforms cost $2.8 million to implement and resulted in the termination of 4 employees, including 2 managers, who couldn't adapt to the new standards or were found to have discriminatory practices. But the results were dramatic. Within 6 months, Group's sales to black customers increased by 47%. Overall revenue increased by 23% as previously excluded customers chose Brooks dealerships. Customer satisfaction scores improved across all demographics. Online reviews became significantly more positive. 1 year after Craig Henderson's termination, Brooks Automotive Group was featured in Automotive News as a case study in how addressing discrimination could improve both ethics and profitability. The article interviewed several customers who'd returned to Brooks dealerships after the reforms. Marcus Johnson, a black attorney. I tried to buy a car at Premium Motors 3 years ago. The salesperson, who was Craig Henderson actually, suggested I look at used cars when I was asking about new models. I left and bought at a competing dealership. When I heard about the changes Brooks made, I gave them another chance. The difference was night and day. I bought a new BMW, and the experience was respectful and professional. Keisha Williams, a black educator. My husband and I have good credit and stable incomes, but we'd been to several luxury dealerships where we felt ignored or dismissed. When we heard Premium Motors had new management and policies, we decided to try them. We worked with Marcus Williams, their salesperson, and he was fantastic. We bought an Audi, and we've recommended the dealership to friends. These testimonials illustrated what Robert had learned. Discrimination wasn't just wrong morally, it was bad business. By excluding qualified black customers, his dealerships had been leaving money on the table while damaging their reputation in a major market segment.
2 years after the incident, Jasmine finally purchased her Mercedes S-Class from Premium Motors. She worked with Marcus Williams, the young salesperson who'd tried to help her the night Craig Henderson refused service. "Dr. Brooks, I want to thank you," Marcus said as they finalized the paperwork. "What happened with you and Craig that changed everything here? Before the reforms, I was pressured to focus on certain customers and ignore others. Now I can serve everyone equally. My sales have actually increased because I'm building relationships with customers I was told to avoid before." Jasmine smiled. "I'm glad something good came from a bad experience. How has the culture changed?" "Completely. We have regular training on unconscious bias. We track our service metrics to ensure equity, and management actually listens when customers or employees report problems. It feels like we're finally living up to what a luxury dealership should be. Excellent service for everyone who walks through the door, regardless of what they look like." As Jasmine drove her new Mercedes off the lot, she reflected on the journey from that frustrating night 2 years ago to this moment. One act of discrimination had exposed a systemic problem, and one person with power, her father, had chosen to use that power not just to punish the individual discriminator, but to transform an entire organization. Robert Brooks had lost a top salesperson, but gained something more valuable, a business that aligned with his values, served all customers equitably, and was more profitable because of it. 5 years after Craig Henderson's termination, Robert was invited to speak at the National Automobile Dealers Association conference about diversity and inclusion in automotive retail. In his speech, he shared the story of Jasmine's experience. "My daughter walked into my dealership as a qualified buyer, successful surgeon, perfect credit, specific vehicle in mind, and my sales manager turned her away in 15 minutes because he made assumptions based on her appearance. That moment changed everything for me. I realized I'd been measuring success by the wrong metrics. I was looking at sales numbers without asking whose sales weren't being counted. I was focusing on closing rates without questioning why certain customers never made it to the closing stage. When we investigated Craig Henderson, we found he'd cost us nearly $5 million in lost sales over 5 years by refusing to serve qualified black customers. $5 million. And that was just one salesperson at one dealership." He paused, looking around the room at hundreds of dealership owners and managers. "How much money are you leaving on the table by allowing discrimination? How many qualified buyers walk out of your dealerships feeling disrespected and excluded? How many black professionals, Latino families, Asian American buyers are going to your competitors because your sales staff made assumptions about them? The automotive industry has a discrimination problem. We profile customers, we make snap judgments, we steer certain people toward used cars when they came in for new, toward lower-end models when they have budgets for luxury. And we do it often enough that it's become normalized. But it doesn't have to be this way. When we implemented reforms at Brooks Automotive, our revenue increased, our customer base diversified, our reputation improved. Treating all customers with equal respect isn't just the right thing to do, it's good business." The speech sparked conversation across the automotive industry. Some dealerships implemented similar reforms, others resisted, claiming the changes were unnecessary or politically correct. But slowly the conversation about discrimination in automotive sales was shifting from whispered complaints to open accountability. Craig Henderson became a cautionary tale in the industry. His case was cited in discrimination training seminars as an example of how personal bias could destroy careers and cost businesses millions. Henderson himself had left the automotive industry entirely. He'd attempted to find sales work at other dealerships, but his termination from Brooks Automotive and the circumstances around it followed him. He eventually found work in insurance sales, a significant step down from his previous position. In a rare interview 5 years after his termination, Henderson admitted, "I thought I was being a good salesman by qualifying customers quickly. I thought I was protecting my time by focusing on people I determined were serious buyers. But I was really just discriminating. I was deciding who was worthy of service based on my prejudices, not on actual qualifications. The irony is I was costing myself money. All those customers I turned away, they bought cars, just not from me. I lost commissions, I lost my career, and I contributed to a culture of discrimination. I can't undo what I did, but I can at least acknowledge it was wrong." Whether Henderson had truly learned or was simply acknowledging what he thought people wanted to hear remained unclear, but his public admission contributed to ongoing conversations about discrimination in sales environments. 10 years after the incident, Jasmine Brooks, now chief of cardiothoracic surgery at Emory and a national leader in her field, was invited to speak at a medical conference about addressing discrimination in healthcare and beyond. She shared her story about the car dealership. "I was discriminated against, but I had advantages many people don't have. My father owned the dealership. I had resources, education, and connections. Most people who face discrimination don't have those advantages. They just experience the indignity and move on. But those of us who do have power, privilege, and resources have a responsibility. When we experience discrimination and we're in a position to address it, we should do so not just for ourselves, but for everyone who will come after us. My father could have just quietly apologized to me and moved on. Instead, he investigated, found a pattern, implemented reforms, and made the changes public. He used his power as an owner to transform his business. That's the model we need, using whatever power we have to change systems, not just to advance ourselves." The speech resonated with many healthcare professionals who'd experienced or witnessed discrimination in medical settings. Jasmine became an advocate for addressing bias, not just in car dealerships, but in hospitals, clinics, and medical education. And every time she drove her Mercedes, now 10 years old but still running perfectly, she was reminded that individual acts of courage, using power responsibly, and refusing to accept discrimination could create ripples of change that extended far beyond a single transaction. Craig Henderson had refused service to the wrong person, not because Jasmine was more important than other customers he'd dismissed, but because she was connected to someone who could demand accountability, and that accountability had transformed an entire organization, improved countless customer experiences, and contributed to broader conversations about discrimination in automotive retail. That was the legacy of one frustrating evening at a car dealership, not just one manager losing his job, but an industry beginning to reckon with its discriminatory practices, and a reminder that power, when wielded with intention and integrity, could create lasting change.
Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.